I've always been someone who prefers to do my shopping late at night. There's something peaceful about wandering through empty aisles when the rest of the world is asleep. But after what happened to me 6 months ago at my local Walmart, I'm starting to question whether that peace is worth the risk. It was a Thursday night around 10:30 p.m. I had made this same trip dozens of times before. Grab my weekly groceries, get in and out quick, no crowds to deal with. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I pushed my cart through the nearly deserted store, checking items off my mental list. I was in the electronics section looking for a new iPhone charger for my daughter when I first heard the voices. In a store that's usually dead silent at this hour, any conversation stands out. At first, it sounded normal enough, just an adult talking to a child somewhere in the nearby clothing section. But something about the man's voice made me pause. There was this tone to it that didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was his out-of-state accent, or maybe it was the way he chose his words. But it definitely wasn't how I would ever speak to a child. I tried to mind my own business and continue shopping, but I found myself unconsciously listening. The man kept going on about how pretty the little girl was, how she deserved nice things, how he wanted to help her pick out something special. The child's voice was harder to make out, but she sounded young, really young. And there was this uncertainty in her voice, like she wasn't sure about the situation but was trying to be polite anyway. I kept telling myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe it was her grandfather or some family friend. But as I stood there pretending to look at phone chargers, the conversation continued, and it only got worse. The man told the girl to come with him to look at more clothes in a different part of the store. He said she would look beautiful in a green dress, that he had seen the perfect item for her, and would buy it if she wanted it. That's when I heard the little girl mention needing to find her mommy. The man's response sent chills down my spine. He assured her that her mommy had said it was okay, that mommy was very busy and shouldn't be disturbed while shopping. His voice took on this urgent quality, as he insisted they needed to go to the back of the store where the better clothes were located. By this point, every parental instinct in my body was screaming that something was very, very wrong. I set down the phone charger and quietly moved closer to where the voices were coming from. Now I could hear everything clearly. The man was talking about taking the little girl somewhere special, promising her toys and clothes and treats if she would just come with him. He kept emphasizing how this was their secret, how special she was, how much fun they would have together. Again, the child asked about her mother. Again, the man told her mommy was too busy to be disturbed. That's when I knew I had to act. I walked around the end of the aisle as casually as possible, trying to get a visual on what was happening. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. A middle-aged man in a dark hoodie was crouched down next to a small girl with blonde pigtails. He had one hand on her shoulder and was gesturing toward the back of the store with his other hand. The little girl looked confused and scared, her eyes darting around like she was searching for someone familiar. My heart was pounding as I approached them, trying to think of how to intervene without escalating the situation. I decided to play dumb and pretend I needed help with something. I cleared my throat and asked the man if he worked there and could help me find an item. He looked up at me with obvious irritation and quickly said he didn't work at the store. I apologized for the confusion, then asked the little girl as naturally as possible if she was shopping with her daddy. The child immediately shook her head. "He's not my daddy," she said. She explained that she had been looking for her mommy when the man approached her. The man quickly jumped in, claiming he was a family friend who had been asked to watch the child. But there was something about his smile, friendly on the surface, but with something dark underneath. I asked the little girl what her mother's name was and where she had last seen her. She told me she had been shopping for groceries while she was allowed to go look at toys. By now, the man was getting agitated, insisting they needed to leave and that I was interfering in family business. I told him I thought it would be best if we found the mother before they went anywhere. That's when his mask started to slip. He stepped closer to me, demanding to know who I thought I was, telling me to mind my own business. I immediately backed away. You never know if someone like this might be armed. The little girl seemed to sense the tension in the air. She moved closer to me, away from the man, and whispered that she wanted to find her mommy and that the man was making her scared. I assured her we would find her mother and suggested we all walk to the customer service desk together. The man refused, claiming he had permission to take the child and that I had no right to interfere. He reached for the little girl's hand, but she pulled away and moved behind me. This time, I didn't back down. I stood my ground and told him firmly that we were going to find the child's mother before anyone was going anywhere. Without waiting for his response, I took the little girl's hand and started walking toward the front of the store, telling her we were going to find her mommy. I glanced back a few times, but thankfully the man didn't follow us. As we approached the customer service area, I heard a woman's voice calling out frantically, shouting a name over and over. The little girl immediately perked up, recognizing her mother's voice. We followed the sound and found a woman who looked absolutely panicked, searching through the aisles. When the woman saw the little girl, the relief on her face was overwhelming. The child ran to her mother, and they embraced tightly. I briefly explained what I had witnessed, and I watched the color drain from the woman's face as she realized what could have happened. She confirmed that she had come to the store alone with her daughter, who had wandered off just a few minutes earlier. The mother immediately asked the Walmart employee at customer service to call security and alert the police. Store personnel moved quickly to lock down the exits, but when they searched for the man, he was nowhere to be found. However, the security cameras had captured everything. The police were able to identify and locate him the next day. And here's the part that still gives me nightmares. I later learned that the man was a convicted child abductor. I still shop at that same Walmart, and I still prefer to go late at night. But now I'm always aware of my surroundings, always listening for voices that don't sound quite right, because you never know what kind of monsters are lurking in those fluorescent-lit aisles when the rest of the world is asleep. If you're ever in a situation like this, trust your instincts. That feeling in your gut that something isn't right, listen to it. It might just save someone's life. This happened to me about 2 years ago when I was working the overnight shift at Walmart. I had just started at one of those massive 24-hour Walmart supercenters. Believe it or not, but the pay was decent, and I needed the extra money to cover my car payments. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and honestly, most nights were pretty uneventful. The overnight crew was small, maybe 5 or 6 people total scattered throughout this enormous store. There was someone watching the self-checkout lanes up front, a couple of stalkers like me, some receivers in the back warehouse, and one manager trying to keep everything running. During those late hours, the place felt like a ghost town. Just the humming of the lights and the AC, and the occasional automated announcement echoing through empty aisles. This particular Tuesday night started normal. I clocked in, grabbed my assignment sheet, and headed to the frozen food section. I actually didn't mind working in the freezer aisles. It kept me moving, and the time passed quickly when I stayed focused on the work. Around 1 a.m., I noticed a customer browsing near the frozen vegetables. Nothing weird about that. Plenty of people shop overnight to avoid crowds. But something about this guy immediately caught my attention. He was tall and lanky, probably in his 40s, wearing a faded denim jacket and dark jeans. What bothered me was how he moved. He wasn't shopping, he was surveying. Moving through the aisles with this deliberate slowness, like he was studying the entire store layout. I kept working, pulling frozen dinners from my cart and stocking the shelves. But every few minutes, I'd glance up and see him still there. He'd moved from frozen vegetables to frozen breakfast foods, then to ice cream, always staying within a few aisles of wherever I was working. His cart was completely empty. I finished the frozen section and moved over to dairy, but there he was again. This time he was pretending to check milk expiration dates, but his eyes kept drifting toward me. That's when I felt the first real chill of fear. I decided to test my suspicions. I wheeled my cart to the complete opposite side of the store, the pharmacy section. It was well lit and visible from multiple angles, which made me feel safer. For about 20 minutes, I worked without seeing him and started to relax. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then I heard the soft squeak of cartwheels on the shop floor. I looked toward the main aisle, and there he was, slowly pushing his still empty cart past the pharmacy section. Our eyes met for just a second before he quickly looked away and kept walking. My hands started trembling as I tried to focus on arranging bottles of Tylenol. Over the next hour, the pattern became undeniable. Everywhere I went, he followed at a distance, never approaching directly, never speaking, just maintaining this creepy surveillance. I started working faster, hoping to finish my tasks so I could retreat to the employee break room. But my increased pace seemed to make him bolder. Instead of keeping his distance, he started getting closer. When I was restocking laundry detergent, he parked his cart at the end of the aisle and just stood there watching me work. When I moved to paper products, he followed immediately and started examining toilet paper packages just a few feet away. The store felt impossibly large and empty. I realized I hadn't seen another employee in over an hour. The self-checkout attendant was at the front of the store, completely out of sight. I was alone with this guy, and he was getting braver. At around 3:30, I was in the clothing section, organizing clearance racks, when he appeared at the opposite end of the department. This time, he left his cart behind and started walking directly toward me, weaving between the circular clothing racks. As he got closer, I got my first good look at him. His clothes were wrinkled and dirty, like he'd been wearing them for days. His hair was greasy and unkempt, but what really disturbed me was his facial expression. This blank, intense stare that made my skin crawl. He stopped about 10 feet away from me and just stood there, staring silently. I tried to ignore him and keep working, but I could feel his eyes boring into me. After several uncomfortable minutes, he finally spoke in this low, raspy voice. "I've been watching you work. You're very dedicated. Do you enjoy working nights? Do you feel safe in the store alone?" I gave short, polite answers while continuing to work, hoping he'd lose interest. Instead, his questions became more personal. He wanted to know my name, how long I'd worked there, whether I had family in the area. I deflected as best I could, but my anxiety was building with every question. Then he asked if I'd like to get coffee with him after my shift ended. I politely declined, saying I needed to get home. He pressed the issue, suggesting we could meet another time. Maybe go for a drive somewhere quiet where we could talk. I told him firmly that I wasn't interested and needed to get back to work. Telling him off made something in his demeanor change immediately. The fake friendliness disappeared, replaced by this cold anger that was even more frightening than his staring. He stepped closer and said I was making a mistake by rejecting him. He knew my schedule now, and he'd be back tomorrow night. Then he walked away without another word, leaving me standing there amongst the discounted clothing racks. I waited several minutes before cautiously making my way toward the front of the store to find the self-checkout attendant. I wanted to report what had happened, but when I reached the front of the store, my heart sank. The customer was still there, standing near the entrance doors, making no attempt to leave. When he saw me approaching, he smiled, this cold, predatory expression that made me stop in my tracks. He waved at me like we were old friends, before turning and walking slowly toward the exit. I found the self-checkout attendant and quickly explained everything. She radioed the overnight manager, who promised to review security footage and file a report. He assured me that if the customer returned, they would call the police immediately. The remaining hours of my shift crawled by. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow in my peripheral vision made me think he'd come back. I stayed close to other employees whenever possible. When 7 a.m. finally arrived, I practically ran to the time clock and hurried out to the parking lot. As I approached my car, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. With trembling hands, I pulled it out and read the handwritten message. "I know which car is yours now. I'll be waiting for you tomorrow night." I drove straight to the police station and filed a formal report, handing over the note as evidence. The officers told me that technically nothing had happened, and they couldn't stop people from entering a shop if they were just talking to the employees. But they would review the security footage and see if they had anything on this person. They told me to consider borrowing a friend's car and parking in different areas of the parking lot if possible, anything which might throw him off. I called in sick for the next few nights, too scared to return. When I finally went back, the manager told me that they had spotted the same guy on the previous nights, browsing through the shop, presumably searching for me, before leaving empty-handed. He assured me that for my next shifts, he would make sure that I would be assigned to work in pairs, and to immediately report should I see anything. While that didn't exactly make me feel safe, it did help my mental well-being. Luckily, the man never returned to the store, and I have since never seen him again. But I never felt completely safe during those late-night hours again. Every unfamiliar face made me nervous. Every empty aisle felt threatening. I eventually transferred to day shifts, willing to take the pay cut in exchange for peace of mind. Some experiences change you forever. That night of being stalked by a predator in the aisle maze of Walmart was one I'll never forget. If you're working alone late at night, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't hesitate to get help, and always let someone know where you are. I'm a 25-year-old female college student from Ohio. Being a broke college student means making sacrifices. While my friends shopped at the nice grocery stores across town, I was stuck with the rundown Walmart 2 miles from my apartment. The area wasn't great. You know, the type of place where you don't walk alone after dark. But it was cheap, and more importantly, it was open until late. Perfect for someone with my unpredictable schedule of classes and part-time work. I'd gotten into the habit of shopping late at night, usually around 10 or 11 p.m. The store was nearly empty during those hours, just a skeleton crew of employees restocking shelves in the dim lighting. It was eerily quiet, but I preferred it that way. There were rarely any crowds, and I never had to queue to pay. That's when I first noticed him. He was standing in the electronics section, wearing the standard blue Walmart vest and name tag like any other employee, maybe in his 30s, with dark hair and what seemed like a friendly smile. When I walked past on my way to the grocery aisles, he looked up from the video games he was restocking and gave me a wave. "Have a good night." I waved back and thought nothing of it, just another employee being polite. But the next week, there he was again. Same friendly demeanor. This time, he actually struck up a conversation. "Hey, I remember you from last week. How's your night going?" I was polite but brief. I had groceries to buy and studying to get back to. Still, he seemed nice enough, probably just trying to break up the monotony of the late shift. Week after week, these encounters became routine. Every time I walked past electronics, he'd stop whatever he was doing to chat. The conversations got longer each time. He started asking personal questions. What was I studying? How long had I lived in the area? What did I think of the neighborhood? At first, I figured he was just being friendly. The store was dead during those hours, and maybe he was bored. But something started feeling off. The way he'd focus so intently on my answers. How he'd remember every little detail from our previous conversations. The questions that felt just a little too personal. Then he started asking about my living situation. Did I have roommates? Which apartment complex was I in? What days did I usually come shopping? I found myself giving vague, uncomfortable answers, but somehow he'd always steer the conversation back to these topics. The breaking point came during midterm season. I was exhausted, stressed, and not thinking clearly. When he asked why I always shopped so late, I made the mistake of being honest. I feel safer when the store isn't crowded. The moment those words left my mouth, I regretted them. Something changed in his expression. A flash of intense interest that made my skin crawl. He was hanging on every word, and I realized I'd just revealed exactly how vulnerable I felt. The next week, I decided to change my routine. Instead of my usual late-night run, I went shopping at 6 p.m. Surely he wouldn't be there during the day shift, right? I was halfway through my shopping when I spotted him near the pharmacy, completely out of his usual department. But here's what made my blood run cold. He wasn't wearing his work uniform. Instead, he was in street clothes with just his employee name tag clipped to his jacket. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same overly friendly smile. "Oh, hey, I just got off my shift and figured I'd do some shopping too. You know, we've been talking for weeks now. Maybe we should grab coffee sometime and continue our conversations outside of here." The way he said it, like we were old friends, like our brief, uncomfortable exchanges had been meaningful connections, made my stomach turn. I politely declined, mentioning I was busy with school and work. His expression changed instantly. For just a moment, the friendly mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. Then he forced the smile back. "That's too bad. Maybe you'll change your mind." I finished my shopping as quickly as possible, constantly looking over my shoulder. As I loaded my groceries into my car, I noticed someone sitting in a vehicle a few spaces away. The parking lot lighting was terrible, but something about the silhouette looked familiar. I tried to get a better look without being obvious, but they seemed to be facing away from me. I started driving home, taking my usual route. But in my rearview mirror, I noticed the same set of headlights maintaining the exact same distance behind me. When I turned, they turned. When I slowed down, they slowed down. My heart started pounding. Someone was following me. Instead of going home, I drove past my apartment complex and continued down the main road. The car stayed behind me, always several car lengths back, like they were trying to be subtle about it. I made random turns through residential neighborhoods, taking routes that made no sense unless you were specifically trying to lose someone. Those headlights followed every single turn. Finally, I pulled into a well-lit 24-hour gas station with several other customers. I sat in my car, hands shaking, watching to see what would happen next. The car drove slowly past the gas station, and for a brief moment, the overhead lights illuminated the driver's face. It was him. I waited at that gas station for 30 minutes before I felt safe enough to leave. I took a completely different route home. I didn't see the car again, but I was trembling by the time I got to my apartment. The next morning, I called Walmart and asked to speak with a manager. I described the employee who'd been making me uncomfortable, his appearance, which department he worked in, the times I'd seen him. The manager sounded confused. She asked me to hold while she checked the employee's schedules. When she came back on the line, her voice had changed completely. "Ma'am, I need you to come in and speak with me in person. According to our records, no one matching that description works in electronics. We don't even have anyone scheduled for late shifts in that department during the times you mentioned." When I met with her later that day, she showed me photos of every electronics department employee. None of them was the man I'd been talking to for weeks. "It's not uncommon," she explained, "for people to get Walmart vests and name tags online or from former employees. We've dealt with this before. Usually it's shoplifters, but sometimes..." She trailed off, but we both knew what she wasn't saying. "Sometimes it's something much worse." For weeks, I'd been regularly talking to a complete stranger who'd been studying my habits, learning personal details about my life, all while pretending to work there. He knew my schedule, my living situation, probably my license plate number from following me home. He'd gained my trust with nothing more than a uniform and a friendly smile. I never went back to that Walmart. I drive an extra 15 minutes to shop elsewhere now, and I've completely changed my routine to make it less predictable. It's been months since this happened, and I've never seen him again. But sometimes, I still find myself looking over my shoulder. Because now I know how easy it is for a predator to blend in, to seem normal, to make you feel safe right up until the moment you realize you're not. I never found out what his real intentions were. And honestly, I don't want to know.